Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
You need dirty work guys on your team. And by that, I mean guys who are taking on double teams so somebody else makes a tackle, or spilling a play so somebody else makes a tackle, or batting the ball down, or, offensively, it's a receiver who blocks or tight ends who block, and those dirty work guys who don't get as much, media love as some of the other players.
That, of course, is new Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores. This is Purple Access, part of the Purple Daily family. Judd Declan is doing the executive producing, as he does for almost every show on Score North. And Chip Scoggins, my former partner in crime on the Vikings beat, Star Tribune sports columnist, current day, joins us as always. All right, Chipper, I heard your questions. With the introductory press conference, Brian Flores taking over for Ed Donatel. Just first off, what were your impressions and how did you come away from a guy who said a lot of things that sounded positive? But I will caution, Ed Donatel said a lot of things that sounded positive as well. So I guess I am a little bit more wait and see. Where do you land?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this today that I'm sure fans were giddy with what they heard. He's an aggressive guy and all the blitzes and versatility and all these things. And his track record backs those up. Like you look at the data, that's how his defense is played. He blitzes a lot. He plays a lot of man press. But that got to the question that I asked Kevin O'Connell was how much in the time that he's been here a week, have they really gone through and sat down and had an honest appraisal of the personnel to see, what works, what doesn't, who can play what I want, who can't. Because I think, and this is that we talked about a little bit last week, but this is the tricky thing is I don't know how long Brian Flores is going to be here. He was, I guess you'd call him a finalist for the Arizona head coaching job. He's going to get head coaching opportunities, interviews next year. I'm going to guess that he's going to be a head coach here fairly shortly again. But I still would give him a lot of voice in the personnel decisions in free agency and draft because, for now he's your defense coordinator and he knows what works and what doesn't. And he's been a head coach. And so my biggest takeaway from yesterday was two things. One, Flores talking about, kind of his personality and how that reflects in his defense and being aggressive. But probably even more than that, Judd, it was clear Kevin O'Connell did some soul searching after the season to figure out how his defense got away from what he wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that came through in a number of answers. It seemed like he always kept coming back to that he was a first-year head coach with a lot on his mind and trying to do a lot of things. And it wasn't really until – I'm sure there was stuff going on behind the scenes, but it wasn't until after that loss, was it Detroit, when he became forceful, like out of the blue forceful, out of, a side that we hadn't seen him publicly with the media in saying what he wants from his defense. And I don't know if the winning kind of masked things or if he just reached the breaking point with seeing what he was seeing. But it's clear he did a lot of self-reflection since the season ended.
I think the Detroit game was a breaking point because of this. If I'm not mistaken, the first touchdown and the Lions, Jared Goff had two deep shots that both went for touchdowns. And the whole point of what Donatel sold was that ain't happening to us. We're actually going to be less aggressive, to be more aggressive on the back end to stop big plays. And then the first, I think Detroit's first or second offensive series, they hit a big play. So I think that's one thing. The other thing that we have to recall is, although I think Flores clearly talked more about being aggressive than Donatel did, if you recall, Chipper, Donatel talked about being multiple, just like Flores did. We're a 3-4 base, but we're not really a 3-4. We're going to play a bunch of 4-3. And he also talked about I like guys that can basically play multiple positions. That's why we used to talk about Lewis Cine, who could have played but didn't before he got hurt. He got hurt on special teams. Lewis Cine's going to be a hybrid linebacker, right? That's what I thought. Yeah. So, I mean, O'Connell's got to take some of the blame here, but he also sort of got sold a bill of goods. And that's where Flores has to deliver now with backing up everything he said. I think he will,
I
but
do too.
that's where I'm a little bit more cautious now this go around than I was the last one.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to have the personnel to be able to pull it off, but I just think with his track record, this is how he coaches. I mean, someone asked him yesterday about showing a lot of zero blitz, and that's kind of what he's known for. And he's like, I like to disrupt. I like to confuse him. So I think he is going to do a lot more than Ed did. I'm curious and I'd have to go back and read the clips and see who else, if it was reported, who else that O'Connell interviewed and why he settled. I mean, I know why he went with Donatel because he was a Vic Fangio tree. And I don't know if that was was it an easy hire, a convenient hire? He didn't spend enough time really thinking about it, or did he get sold a bill of goods that he thought it was going to be one thing, and then because he talked about it. I think in the to the answer to the question I asked about how it was a year ago yesterday when he had his introductory press conference, and he talked about being aggressive and having this aggressive mentality. He said that was a football philosophy, not an offensive philosophy, and that quote really jumped out to me as to say somewhere along the line there was a disconnect between Donatel and him in terms of how the philosophy of how he wanted to play. And
right,
maybe he was not forceful enough as a rookie head coach to, put his foot down and say, this is what I want. Or I think he feels like it, because he talked about he's evaluating how his whole approach. And I think it got away from him, Judd. And maybe he just wasn't forceful enough in saying, this is what I want. He gave him too much leeway.
Well, that's a great point, because that was actually twofold as well. One, it was Donatel. Yes, he didn't deliver, and in his mind, I think he didn't for a reason. And that's the second point that's coming up. How much of this roster is KOC going to turn over because they made mistakes in bringing guys back? Like that's the thing, is you can't tell me I want to be fast and aggressive and then have those two linebackers. You signed Jordan Hicks,
Yeah.
So that's the other part of this, is it's going to have to get personal. He's going to have to make moves that upset people. I don't think he likes doing that, but if you don't, this is where you're left in this netherworld.
But Judd, would KOC and Kwesi have done that if they were allowed to? Or did this come from the ownership that, hey, we're going to be super competitive and this roster can win? It was the coaching. We need to get more out of it. If there was no directive or anything from ownership, do you think they would have blown it up, or was there just not enough time to do that in the short span? I mean, they got hired, and then I don't know, you just come in that first year and say, you know what, we're blowing the sucker up. I think it takes a year to kind of see what you have in the salary cap with what guys can do. Really the coaching. I
think one of the reasons why Ryan Poles didn't get the job here or take it was because he wanted to do exactly that. But, I mean, the problem was, not to defend Ed because he didn't do a good job, but part of the problem was when those are your two linebackers and you're playing that scheme, it's not workable. So, and yeah. I did get a note from a guy on Twitter that I found, and I didn't pick up on this as well as this person did. It was very intriguing though. And I think he's exactly right. Throughout the course of that entire press conference, I don't think Brian Flores ever mentioned a name. Like, he didn't say, I'm excited about Danielle Hunter, I'm excited about Harrison Smith. He said, there's a lot of guys here. Very, very just vague, right? But I thought that was an intriguing, that's probably a strategy that might have started with O'Connell and Kwesi of let's not guarantee anybody anything here.
Well, because if you go back and remember, I know at O'Connell's, and I think Kwesi's too, they mentioned guys by name, the Harrison Smiths, these guys.
Oh. Yeah, chapter and verse.
So it's like when they did it, because we were thinking, okay, they're gonna turn this roster over last year. When they did that, you're like, were they just being nice, or were they giving us a clue on on the way they're going? And obviously, it was a clue on the way they're going. It could be purposeful. It could have been, hey, don't marry yourself to anybody in this press conference, because we have some tough decisions here coming at how we're going to reshape this roster. And they're not going to say that in the introductory press conference, like, oh my gosh.
That's what I said. We got to blow the sky high.
Yeah, just wait till you see what we do here. So I'm curious to see it's twofold. One, salary and contracts, but two, I'm sure he looks at this and is like, nope, not going to fit. Just doesn't fit what I want. And this is not going to be. And this is the fascinating thing to me, because you cannot fix a defense with this many problems in one offseason. They don't have enough picks, enough money to sign. That you just can't. But I go back to, how long is Flores going to be here? I mean, he kept, anytime he got asked sort of about that, he said, my feet are where they're at, or I'm at where my feet are.
Yeah.
It was his way of, basically saying, I'm not answering the question.
Right.
And so, this could be an abrupt end again. But I still think you have to, regardless of who the coordinator is, the expectation that this defense needs to get younger and faster, that doesn't change. I mean, it could be any coordinator. That has to change.
Bingo. Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. So to me, this whole thing is twofold. One is your scheme sort of just sucked. Didn't work out. So like Brian Flores needs to come in and establish, whether it's for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, he needs to establish his scheme. Okay. But you just hit on the other important thing, which has nothing to do with the scheme, and that is the personnel itself. And this was an aging out defense. There were too many guys, Eric Kendricks, Jordan Hicks,
Pat Peterson.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you put Harrison.
Harry's not young. And then like
Za'Darius, Tomlinson.
Yeah. Za'Darius was a great pickup until he got hurt in Buffalo, and then he basically had 1 sack. So yeah, there's just, like, to me, it's 2 separate things. And look, if Brian Flores can identify defensive talent, I don't care if he's in, with Team X next season, right? You're going to listen to what he says. So this is, and I don't expect him to fix the whole thing, but I do expect that, it's not like you need these household name star players to improve on how bad this defense was in 2022.
No, yeah, and it's. I mean, O'Connell, he knows that that side of the ball needs to get turned over and get younger and faster. That's not. He doesn't need a well-respected defense coordinator to tell him that. That had to be obvious just watching it. And so that's the charge for him and Kwesi. But I do like. I trust Brian Flores' evaluation. I think he's a really good coordinator and really good coach. And you like the fact that he was all those years with Bill Belichick, and he was with Mike Tomlin. Some Hall of Fame coaches here. So
Mikey T, baby.
Yeah, Mike.
I love Tomlin.
Yeah, Mikey T. That's what Kevin O'Connell called him, and I like to call him B-Flow.
B-Flow and Mikey T.
B-Flow. But that does speak to, it goes back to the original thing that I don't know that he ever really, him and Donatil ever meshed on what they wanted. It was just a poor fit. I'm sure Donatil's a nice guy and I'm sure they got along, but it was a bad fit, like philosophy wise, just in terms of how they saw that defense should play. And so, but it'll be, I'm curious to see how they attack fixing this defense. Either you start with free agency and think that's where you're going to do it, or you drafting a cornerback with the first pick. I saw was it McShay had him taking a wide receiver.
Yeah, I actually like that. If you address corner in free agency,
that's the thing. If you do that, that means you went out and spent money on a cornerback in free agency,
which I think they need to do. I like.
Yeah, and what do you think of Tomlinson?
I don't mind him. I don't think he's great, and I'm curious what the request on a contract is going to be. I'm not going to break money. I'm not going to break the bank to keep him.
No, I just think
it's not like Pat was in Pat's prime.
Yeah, Judd, we focus so much on the secondary, and rightfully so, because they have so many questions. But man, I think they really need to bolster that line. Just watching this in the playoffs, to me, that's where you have to start. I take that back. I think you need to start by getting a veteran corner, but I think you really have to put a heavy emphasis on that line.
What's your thought on the fact that I think Danielle Hunter is going to almost certainly want a new contract before training camp starts?
I would do it. I would do it and think that under the thing that he was not used properly last year or just not comfortable with whatever they're asking him to do.
Mm-hmm.
He still should be in his prime, and he's still explosive. When you see, I think second half of the year he was good, and I would, whatever the Vikings have some leverage too, because it's not like he continued on that historic pace he was on, so he's lost some of his leverage too. Za'Darius, I think that one's I could see them moving on from there, but you have to be able to replace him, and that means, either draft or free agency, and that's expensive if it's free agency. So,
does Patrick Jones like that? Like, he's a guy who looks the part, and there have been times where I've been impressed, but it feels like there hasn't really that he hasn't gotten as much of a shot, and he's not young now. He's what, 3 years in?
Well, and that's where
another one I'm curious about.
That's one where to me, that's where you go to Brian Flores and say, "What do you think?
Right?
What's the ceiling? What can you get? I mean, what can you turn him into?" And that's where you trust his judgment. And to me, that's he's a prime example of a guy that you look at Flores and trust his expertise and let him tell you like what he thinks he can get out of a player like that. Because that takes, if he says, you know what, he's being misused, we got to get him doing this, we got to get him doing that, and you can get him on his contract, and then that fixes one area.
So what current guys defensively, from what you heard from B-Flow, what current guys do you think benefit the most?
I think Asamoah.
Agreed.
I would think Seen, if healthy, because the fact that he says, when he uses that word versatility, to me that means a guy who's athletic and can run and can do different things, right? And so I think those two jump out to me most. I think those two guys, because of the physical makeup they have, and it's they probably fit with the aggressiveness with what he wants to do. And that's where you look at like some of the veterans, it's like they're just kind of pigeonholed into their roles and on the backside, back nine of the career. So but I would say those two come to mind. And you hope Seen is healthy and
he looks good.
And
the
videos. Yeah, the videos. So, but those two, I would say.
So as far as the draft goes too, here's my new thought process, or my latest thought process, Chip Scoggins. The more I think about this, I think I would aggressively try and make my one splash free agent signing at cornerback. And I think drafting a receiver, especially if they start to fall, because it's a pretty good class, I think drafting a receiver, because the more I look at that, I just don't think that you have a second option to Jefferson. If, and this is a big if, Thielen comes back, he's a 3 or a 4. Osborne, I think if Osborne was considered a true 2, we would have seen that emerge, and we didn't. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. But I just think as far as the running mate for Justin Jefferson, that person is not here. And I would almost prefer to see that guy drafted on a rookie contract by a coach who knows exactly what type of young talent he's trying to find, and then give Flores a free agent corner who might not break the bank, but gets a pretty damn good payday coming out of his first contract.
Yeah, I would target. Well, I would target the corner in free agency and spend money there and get a guy that is your number one, right? And then you have this young group, Shelley, Evans, that group.
Dantzler, maybe. I don't know about him now.
Booth. I don't know about Dantzler, but I'd say Booth.
Yep, Booth.
Evans, Shelley, that group, because there's question marks there. But Judd, I start with the line, man. I start with the offensive line. I start with the defensive line, and I would go heavy there. I just think it has to be built that way. I mean, you look at Eagles, Niners, the way the Chiefs' offensive line played in that Super Bowl, not on the sack. I would bolster there. I would try to win through the line.
Interesting. Would you potentially consider trading back a little bit in the first round to accrue more picks and trying to get John Michael Schmitz?
I say yes because they need picks, but it absolutely drove me crazy when Spielman would do that and you pass up a good player to get more picks. If I'm in love with an offensive guard or a center or a defensive tackle that's just a wrecking ball in there, I'm taking him. I'm not trading back to try to get more picks. Now, if there's 3 guys that you're happy with and you think they're both going to be okay, they'll be there. But I think they have to focus on their interior line offensively. I mean, they just do, Judd. And I think defense too. So that's where I'd start. I mean, yes, you'd love to have a really fast number 2 opposite JJ. But can't you get that guy in the 4th round? Can't you get that guy in the 5th round? Or
I mean, theoretically, yes. Now I think it's becoming, because I used to think exactly like what you just said, except for the fact that receivers are now becoming such a premium position that I'm not sure, unless it's a complete fluke, that the Stephon Diggs' fall now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're not getting the Jefferson. You're not getting the Jefferson. But,
no.
but I just think you can find and develop that.
Mm-hmm.
The odds of getting that are better than just a dominating offensive line guy. I mean, that John Michael Schmidt, the way his offseason. I mean, we've seen him for 4 years and what he's doing what he did at the Senior Bowl. And I'm sure he's going to wow him at the combine. If he's your guy, I just think you have to solidify that line. You have to improve it, and that's the way you're going to elevate this team.
So to get into specifics of that, are you saying center, right guard, and defensively 3 technique?
Yeah, center, right guard. I mean, even left. I mean, I know Cleveland is. He graded out really well at PFF as a run blocker, not so much as pass blocker. I mean, but the interior of that line, and then 3 technique or just that defensive tackle that wreaks hell on the offense.
Kevin Williams.
Yes, and we've seen those guys. I mean, you saw him with the Giants in that game.
Yeah.
That guy. Try to go find that guy who just absolutely demolishes the interior of the line and makes it cave. That's what I would try to find. I know it's easier said than done, but I just think I would start. My whole focus has shifted. I mean, I was like, wide receiver. But just watching these playoffs and just seeing how knowing it's like it's really cemented to me, man. You got to win in the trenches. I mean, you just have to, and that's where I'd put my emphasis right now.
That's the when Childress got the job here, that's the one thing that from an administrative personnel standpoint he got right. They went.
Yeah, look at that line he had. Yeah,
he wanted 2 lines that could kick ass, and he got those. And I mean, to your point, San Francisco kicks your butt. Like, if nothing else, it might not
Philadelphia
be star players, but they kick your butt. And so I don't disagree with you. I mean,
look at Philadelphia. If they have the best offensive line in that defense, it starts with their line, and they had the most sacks in the league.
I guess my question is this too, because I do agree that Spielman trading back or what Kwesi did last year in the first round can drive me nuts. I just don't know how you're going to accrue more draft picks without trading back, and 4 draft picks. Like, I'm not for 15. Don't get me wrong. Rick overdid it. I just don't know that anybody would be comfortable with 4 unless you were coming off like a Super Bowl winning season.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're going to get a couple compensatory picks, but even so, like,
I think it's 1 now.
Yeah,
I think it's gonna be 1 for Conklin.
If you have 8 picks and you're trading back, I'm like, really? Come on. But at 4, that's what I'm saying. I understand you probably have to this year because you just need more. You need more guys. You need more draft picks, and so I'll understand if they do it this year. But it's just in general, it just drove me crazy when you're trading back to a lesser spot to get guys who may or may not even make your roster.
And was there any interesting post press conference scuttlebutt once it got done yesterday?
No, it ended in
side sessions.
No side sessions other than Flores walked around and introduced himself to every media member there. Spent a few minutes just kind of saying hello and all that. I mean, he seems like a very obviously serious guy. Right. Kind of the opposite personality of O'Connell. not opposite, but just different, But I mean, cordial. It was nice to kind of just introduce yourself, say, "Hey, welcome to town." But there was no side session interviews, but just him, introduce himself to everybody that was in the room there.
Last thing, Chipper, when do you expect that we are going to hear the first rumblings about Justin Jefferson's ask on a contract, which I think is going to be off the charts? And by the way, it should be. And
Yeah.
The Kirk Cousins contract extension, it might not be a reality, but it's got to be broached at some point too. The combine, you think, or is it going to be?
That's what I was going to say. The combine's what, next week or 2 weeks down? That's where those things typically float out. Agents are there around all the riders. So I'm guessing that's going to be the first one of here's what he's looking for. Here's what they're up against. And I'm guessing that'll probably, wouldn't you assume that'll be the first real substantive talks between Kwesi and his agents?
Yes, it won't be a champagne problem once they really start talking.
No,
it'll be a front burner. Oh my God, who has the money? Are the Wilfs this rich conversation?
That's right.
And it should be. He's that good.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I asked him about it. What's the challenges when we had the year in? He's like, it's a champagne problem. I'm not sure it's always going to be a champagne problem because you're going
to want to drink champagne. Just forget how much money you're about to give the kid. That's how it'll be a champagne problem.
But it'll get done because there's not a or else. I mean, it'll get done. I mean, It has to.
Yes. I think it might get a little bit contentious because it's just going to be so big, and things do ordinarily get contentious. What's your best guess on Kirk then?
I think they do a mini extension, another year.
I'm with
to help out. But my guess is it'll be a one more year. I don't think they want to have him in a lame duck year, unless you have your quarterback that you draft and it's like, okay, you're going to sit, you're going to have a red shirt year. I think that's how it's going to unfold versus ride this thing out.
All right, man. Great stuff. And we'll talk to you next week, Chip Scoggins.
All right, brother. We'll see you, man.
All right. You take care. Bye.